Okay, so you guys got handout for today, exercise 219. Before we get into that, I do want to remind you that you have your skyscraper renderings and unrolled JPEG due next week on Monday for assignment 203. And then we move into really working hard on your final project. There is going to be an assignment 204 that will have to do with building a light fixture and rendering a light fixture, which obviously is both physical in terms of having to build something, and then the V-Ray side of actually making it work and light and all the rest of it. You guys don't have anywhere near the skills in that, so it's coming, but it's not something that you have to worry about just yet. Today, you should have already been working on your final project. I gave you all class yesterday to think about it and to decide what you wanted to do relating to your building. I am not delusional, and I don't think that you'll be done today by any means, but at the same time, you should have a start. What I'm going to talk through today during lecture is how do you kind of conceptually organize your files, use blocks to your advantage, and also how do you ultimately drop your building onto the site. So if you're not ready to drop it onto the site, that's okay. This lecture will exist for you to reference later, but at the same time, I want to show it to you. Next week, we're actually going to start doing our first renderings of this building, so it's important that you really start working on it and get ready for it. Obviously, your building is going to evolve and change by the end of the semester, so you'll end up re-rendering, but I'm going to try to walk you through the daytime, exterior, interior. We'll deal with lighting, etc. So it all kind of builds on itself. So now's a good time to really get started as we push toward the end of the class. So in terms of today, I want to kind of talk through conceptually how you work through and organize your files. In my mind, the ideal way of setting this building up is to have one file that contains the model of your building. Okay, so I have open here what I call my retreat base, which is the model of the building. Now, obviously, I'm using the model that I've used before, so I have a lot more detail than you probably have at this point. But that's to be expected. But I've worked on this in its isolation. It starts at point 0, 0. And I've really worked at this to build up what I think is going to fit nicely in the site. Now, you'll notice a few things that I've kind of tried to think through. One is that this is going to be somewhere on the slope, and I don't really know where this lower wall is going to intersect the slope just yet. Likewise, I've designed it such that on the back side here, this building is almost entirely buried, and it's designed to kind of sit into the site that way. Likewise, I don't have any windows on this back side except for these taller windows, so I'm anticipating that the land is going to come in somewhere in that region. So I'm trying to be thoughtful about how I'm building my building such that it'll fit, but ultimately I'm also using this large wall that's going to come down and kind of block the front part of my building, because in Rhino we don't have to worry about gravity, we don't have to have a foundation, we just have to make sure it sticks through the ground surface itself. So I'm trying to set it up that way. The other thing that becomes very, very important is that you think through what your layers are going to be and how organized your file is. And so, like I said, this one's a little bit more developed at this point than you will be. But at the same time, I have one master layer that goes above everything else that's called the Artist's Retreat. And then inside of that, I have an interior layer. Inside that interior layer, I have walls, concrete walls, stairs, stair railing, decor. Right? Then I have an exterior. I have a roof. I have exterior walls. I have the roof cap, which would be this little piece there. Right? So I'm really specifying what these various elements are so that I can ultimately assign materials. And you can see that my materials are being assigned there as well. Then I move into landscape. Okay, so I have some stuff out here, like I have a little patio, and I'd want that to be colored in a particular way, or have a specific texture on it. And then I also want to point out something else called the Slender Window. And so what I did is, in a separate file altogether, over here, I modeled what I wanted my window to look like. And so here's that window. I have Slender Window 1. I have the glass, the mullions, the exterior sash, the interior sash, and the exterior frame, right? So that I can have different materials on that. So there it is. And I've chosen to save this. and then I brought this in as a block reference into this file. So every place that there's one of these windows, it's the same window file. I'm just using it over and over again. Right? So I'm trying to use that to my advantage. We talked earlier in the semester about using these kinds of things and blocks. So within this file that has my building in it, I'm using that to my advantage in that I'm using that block over and over again. This glass wall of windows is a little bit harder to do as a set of blocks because they're more custom for the wall itself. Likewise, these up here, oops, sorry, are a little bit more custom too. So I ended up doing those in this file. You don't have to create these as blocks. It's just something that is an option should you want to. Okay. So I've kind of worked through this building. I obviously have some stairs that have been put in. So I have a variety of pieces that have been put together that are really starting to get ready for my final project. And so once I have this file set up, right, I'm going to make sure I just save it as my base retreat, or whatever you want to call it. And then I can use this as a block reference for the building site. So the nice thing about this process is if I want to make any changes, all I have to do is go back, open up this file, change something, and then it'll populate into my scene. Then my scene is going to be the one that has the landscape, the lighting, the environment, the HDRI background image. All of that's going to happen in the other file. Does that make sense? Right? So I can come back to this and just edit the geometry itself. Okay, so this is ready. I'm going to go ahead and go to the course website, and I'm going to download the zip file with the site information, which you probably already did last class, but I did it again today. And I'm going to start with a brand new Rhino file, and I'm going to start setting up the context or the environment for this particular thing. So we'll go to New, Large Object Inches. And once this is open, I'll confirm that my units are correct, which they are. Perfect. And then I'm going to go to File and then Import, and I'm going to bring in the SketchUp file that I downloaded. So here's 219. There's the final site. I'm picking the site 2, the one on the coast for this one. And I'll go ahead and click on Open. And this should look very, very familiar to you because it's going to come in. We can get rid of the person. It's going to come in as that classic SketchUp mesh. And I'm going to end up with a Google set of layers. So I want to rebuild this out of being its triangulated mesh into the surface. So I'm going to go through that process that we did back in the topo section. And I'm not going to spend too much time walking through step by step, but let's say that I'll use this layer as my terrain and this layer as my terrain construction, which I'm ultimately going to delete. So that'll be active. I'll get rid of these guys. I'll get rid of this. All right, so let's take this, and I'm going to contour. Let me turn on vertex and ortho. And we'll do that at 100 feet. Same thing, I'm going to contour going this way at 100 feet. We can turn off the Google stuff altogether. Oops. Let me look at it in the top view. Ooh, that's a nasty one here. So let me go ahead and trim around the edges. So trim. And like that. And then I'm going to go with this whole set right here, and we're going to do that network surface or curved network. So it's under Surface, Curved Network. And of course, it's unable to sort the curves, right? Let me just do a quick double check here. because these overlap. Bear with me for just a second. There we go. Now let's do that network surface. What? You gotta love it when you try to do it and it doesn't want to do what you want it to do. There's the problem right there. All right. Try that one more time. There we go. So, of course, we have to wait. And then I'll rebuild. So it shows up. Single click to select that surface, rebuild. And we'll do it at maybe 100 by 100. I'll say OK. All right. So now I want to put that terrain on the terrain layer. Change object layer. There it is. And if we look at it in the perspective view, we can switch out of the wireframe into the shaded mode. We'll make terrain active, and we'll turn that off as well. And there is my piece of terrain. This is the coast one. Okay, so I have that established. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these extra layers, even though there's objects on them. Unfortunately, Susan's there, so we have to get rid of Susan first. I know. So let's go to Blocks, Block Manager. There's Susan. Let's get rid of her. I don't want you anymore, Susan. And then we'll get rid of... What? There we go. OK, so all I have left is the terrain, which is the idea. Now remember, the biggest thing about this is keeping organized, because as you start to get these really big files, if you don't pay attention to your layers, you're going to get lost. So I have a layer called terrain, but in reality, I probably need something called like site. And I'll call it site environment, and I'll put terrain underneath. Ultimately, I'll have some other layers here like sun, and maybe the sphere and the mirror ball and all of that will end up on this layer as well. For right now, we'll go ahead and delete that, and we'll leave it as just the terrain. OK, so now that I have my terrain established, I need to bring in and sit my building on the site somewhere. So this is where we're going to use that block reference, and I'm going to go to Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance, and I'm going to go find my retreat base, which I just saved. I'll go ahead and click on Open, and that will bring in this Insert Block Instance. Okay? So I have my file. When I say OK, it's going to present me with the Insert File options. And this is something that you guys are aware of from before, and that is that I can choose to link the file, I can choose to embed and link, or I can choose to embed the file altogether. If I'm not worried about losing the file and forgetting about it somewhere, link is often a good option because of the complexity of what we're trying to do. It'll keep the file size down. So I'm going to leave it as link for right now, and I'll go ahead and say OK. Okay? You see that when I load that as a linked file, all of my layers come in, but they're all grayed out. So I don't have the ability to mess with those, which is part of what I like about having it as a block reference. This is going to force you into making your edits on the original file. The one other thing that I should have is a layer called Blocks. Oops, sorry, I have to insert my building first. OK, so here's my building. Okay, and I want it to sit kind of in one of these little side spurs. And I could pick either one of these. They're very similar in their orientation. I'll pick this one. And I'm going to go ahead and just click to sit it right there for right now. It's obviously it's underground, but that's OK. I'll come back and I'll mess with it in just a second. Now that it's here, I'm going to have a layer called Blocks. And I'm going to change the object to be on the Blocks layer. This is one of those weird, quirky things about Rhino. is you have control of the block via a layer, but you also have control over the individual elements of the block. So you have two different ways of controlling it. So I like to have a blocks layer and then sublayer all the rest of this referenced file. Okay, so here it is. And if we look at it, we can see that my building's now kind of half buried, or mostly buried. It's not exactly what I want. So let me go ahead and move it a little bit. I'm going to move it this direction first. Move it out a little bit. Okay, so it's starting to be shown. Okay, maybe it needs to come out a little bit more. Let's move it this way a little bit more. Okay, I'm starting to like it. And you may find that as you start to do this, there may be some changes that need to happen. Right? Now, I'm a little bit lucky because I've brought this particular building in a few times. So I've seen this and how it fits into the site, and I have a reasonable idea of what it's going to look like. Right? So it's looking like it's fitting pretty well. It looks like I have a little hole right there that I'll have to fill in with a little bit of wall. That's fine. Likewise, I have this piece that's kind of snaking all the way through my building, and I'll have to deal with that particular part of the terrain as well. Maybe we'll move it up just a little bit more. Yeah, a little bit more. No. But your ultimate position is important, right? So you have to have thought through kind of approximately where you want this stuff to occur. So now that I've brought it into the building, what I need to do is I need to figure out how to cut out these pieces of terrain that intersect where my building is. So I'm going to create a brand new layer over here. And on that brand new layer, let me rename it. And I'm just going to call it like construction line. Construction lines. And I'll make that active. And let's put it up under that site environment layer for right now. And what I'll do is I'll look at my building in the top view. So there it is. Can't see too much. And I'm going to draw a curve that goes all the way around the outside of the walls of my building. Now remember, in my particular building, I have this little roof cap that exists. So I don't want to be where the roof cap is. I want to be where the walls are. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my line. And I'm going to snap to each of these corners. Now, as I'm drawing this, it isn't necessarily going to always be in a straight line. And so you can see here, see how as I'm drawing it, it goes way down on a diagonal as it's snapping? That's okay, because ultimately I'm going to do a projection of this particular shape. So let's come all the way back to here. Let's go to there. Right there. Actually, you know what? I'm going to back up. I'm going to go across here. I want to go right to where those two intersect, but unfortunately, I didn't do an intersection of these first. I want to know where this wall intersects with this surface. So I'm just going to do a quick intersect. Maybe it won't be so quick. Right there. Figure out where those intersect at that point. So we'll come back. And I'll go from right there. I'll go across to right here. I'll continue across to the front there. And back up to where I started. So now I'll take that line that I just drew. And I'll take the line that I drew in the back here. Okay, and you see how those really don't correspond nicely to the footprint of my building at all? The good news is it really doesn't matter, because all I'm going to do is take those lines and project them onto this surface. That's what I need. So let's go ahead and in the top view, I'm going to type project. And I'm going to project them onto my surface. I'll hit enter. And when I do that, I now get a line that almost perfectly corresponds to where my surface intersects with my building. You guys see that? Yep. Okay. So let me go ahead and join those together so it's one closed curve. And then I'm going to use that curve as a trim. So I'll type trim, and I'll get rid of the inner part of that surface. So now it's cut out, and my building is sitting into the surface there. Okay. Likewise, I've gotten rid of the little piece there, and ultimately I'm going to have to add a little bit more here. So I'll show you adding that in just a second. So I have one little area over here that I want to be kind of changed in its grade. So the old surface went way down lower there, and I wanted it to kind of even out and come across and meet up with my little wall that's right there. So I'm kind of regrading this particular part of the hillside so it fits into my building. So I have, if I do a duplicate edge, I have this edge of the surface, right? And I can use that as part of it. So we'll leave that there. I have this edge of the surface, but I'd like to have it not quite even with the top of the wall. I want it to be set down a little bit underneath the wall. So let me go ahead and dupe the edge of the wall, which would be right. No, it's not going to let me do it. Let me go ahead and draw it instead. It's not going to do it because it's a block. So there, to there. I think it's just a line. There. So now I have that curve. And I'm just going to move that vertically. Move vertical, I don't know, maybe 4 inches. Oops. So it's a little bit below where that wall is. Okay. So I have that there. But I probably need to match up this corner right there. So it's not going to quite work. So let me go ahead and take a line, and we'll go from here down to right there, and across to right here, and back up to right there. So this set of curves there, plus this curve that is on the surface. Oh, come on. Right there. Those are 4 curves. Let me explode them so they're not joined together. I can do a curve network from those curves. So we'll go up to Surface, Curve Network, and I'll say OK. And that then fills in with the exact grade that I want in that particular section. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to take this surface and this surface, make them part of the same surface. So let's change them both to be on the red layer, and then let's go ahead and join them together so that they're now part of the same surface. So I've taken this, and even though the ISO curves here make it look a little bit different, it's actually a smooth transition across those two now. Okay? Even though it's been regraded and I've reestablished it, but that's part of how I'm integrating this into this particular building site. Okay, so I told you that I had this problem because I have a hole in the back here that needs to be solved. And so what I'm going to do now is I'll go ahead and I'll save this file, and we'll put it into my 219 folder, and I'm going to call this A205 site, and I'll go ahead and click Save. Okay, so now I can go back, and I happen to have left it open, to the retreat base, and I can modify this back edge. Okay, so I need a little bit of wall that's going to come down this side. So let me go ahead and build in a little bit of wall here. Tell you what, let me just do a surface. That's all I really need. to go from right there, and I'm going to drop that surface down as well. So I want to make sure that this is on the same layer as this. So let's take a quick look and see, okay, this wall here, it shouldn't be on the interior layer. We need to change that. It should be on the exterior walls. Oh, that's interesting. Let's do a new sublayer. Foundation. And let's change the object layer there. Let's change the object layer there. Oh, there it is, the exterior concrete wall. Let me change it onto this. And we can actually get rid of this layer. Okay, so now I've redone that so that I have a little surface in the back. Okay, and now I can just save this file. Perfect. And we can go back to my site, which is right here, and I can go to Edit, Blocks, Block Manager, and we can see that it says already linked file is newer. So the change that I made is now ready to be updated. I'll go ahead and click on Update. Now this is something that you'll see very frequently when you're working with blocks, and that is that V-Ray will pop up a little dialog saying, I already have a basic glass in my scene. Do you want me to replace the basic glass with the one I'm bringing in as part of the block? I almost always say replace existing material and say apply to all, so that I don't have to click it multiple times. One block updated successfully. And so now, if I spin around, there's that surface that I just created. So this becomes really easy. I can edit the building on one file, and it's always going to drop in very nicely into this. So this file with the site is where we'll put things like the HDRI background image, the sun. All of those things will happen in this file. The building itself is always going to exist in the other file. Does that make sense? Right? It makes it really easy. The other thing that you'll find when we get into lights and lighting is that if you have a version of Rhino on your home computer and you don't have V-Ray installed, when you open your Rhino file, sometimes, and it's not a predictable sort of thing, the Rhino file will corrupt your V-Ray lights if you don't have V-Ray installed at home. So by doing this, because the lights are always going to be in this scene, you can safely open your actual building and make all the edits you want to it, and it will never corrupt any of your lights. Okay? It's just something that I'm forewarning you about. We'll talk more detail as we go a little bit further along. So there's obviously more that we will do to customize the site and apply materials and all the rest of it, but what I wanted to talk through today was the whole organization of your file structure, and then how you would take a building like this and drop it into your site, both cutting it out of the terrain and then adapting terrain near to where you want it to be in your particular building. Okay? Are there any questions? No? So the rest of today, I want you to work hard on your building. Try to get as far as you can. I would like it if you could get it into your site today as well. Even if it's very basic in terms of massing of boxes, still try to get it on the site. The site will help inform what you're doing in your design process. Okay?